Hi everyone, hope you guys are all having a great day today. Today's video, I'm going to cover the whole entire market in terms of Dow Jones, Nasdaq, and S&P 500, including the economic calendar. And I do post these videos daily, so I highly encourage you to double check the latest videos on X and YouTube, so that way you get the most latest up-to-date information. And before I get to technical analysis, it's pretty interesting actually because we hit the limits, but I'm going to go over that. I'm going to go over the economic calendar first before I get to the analysis portion. And so for Monday, July 15th, 2024, at 8:30 a.m., we have Empire State Manufacturing Survey. And at 12 p.m., we have Fed Chair Jerome Powell speaking. So Monday, we'll see how it goes. Just because when Jerome Powell speaks, the markets tend to pretty much consolidate a little bit and then probably dip before the speech and then either spike up or down depending on the reaction that the market takes from that. Now, in terms of the analysis portion, I'm going to start off with the Dow Jones because it is pretty interesting. We have this upward trend resistance line dating back since 2021. And you can see right about here, 1, 2, and then 3, 4 touch points. And then if you zoom in, you could see that it breaks down to actually 2 each in a way. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So technically 6 total. And I did not expect us to spike that fast to the upward trend resistance line. I thought we were going to get stopped out for the time being either at the 39,900 points, give or take, that I mentioned before. Mind you, we're at 40,000 right now points. Or we would get stopped out. If that level doesn't stop us out, it would be about 40,050, 60 points, give or take. Now, we ended up getting to it, which was pretty much at the, didn't hit it clean, but my lines are not perfect, right? About 40,290 points, give or take. And it looks like it hit about 40,258 points, give or take, and it dipped down. Now, the question is, are we actually heading down? For the Nasdaq, S&P, and Dow Jones, they are indicating downside, but they're all showing a different narrative for all of them. Mind you, by the way, the volatility index is on the low side still, which is quite interesting because if it was higher, I would expect more downside specifically. But to show you what I mean, for example, this is the MACD line. MACD line indicates if it's a bearish or bullish movement. And right now, for the 1 month chart, indicating potentially further downside, right? It's in the bearish movement and it just crossed over. So potentially could continue down. And then for the 3 month chart, it's not crossed over, but it's heading down potentially. Again, we did hit the limits basically for the most part. But the interesting part too, by the way, I should state, is after the short-term dip, it looks like it's going to break this 20, in my opinion, by the way. This is all just basically just for entertainment purposes and basically to show you what I think I'm seeing for myself, because I do trade the market quite a bit. The only thing is I will say I kind of missed this part. I wasn't watching the market today specifically. I wish I was, because if I saw this limit being hit, I personally would have shorted the market, which would have been beneficial because if you saw the S&P and Nasdaq, they all dipped down coincidentally. And there was no indications. Well, there was indications, but not strong indications, in my opinion, to show that we're potentially going to dip down fully, as opposed to this indication personally is a pretty strong indication in my opinion. So if I saw this earlier, which I wish I paid attention to the market fully today, I would have shorted something, either the Dow Jones or S&P or Nasdaq, just to take a chance on it. Nothing guaranteed, but yeah, that it is what it is. But either way, for the 6 month, it shows downside, I believe, from what I saw, potentially. So technically arching down, but it's not that strong. But then here's the part where I think it's going to break this upward trend resistance line, again, dating back since 2021. And then this is, by the way, upward trend support level. If you haven't seen my previous videos, it was between this channel the whole entire time, upward trend support level, and this dates back since April of 2024. But so this is the interesting part. So if you go to the 1 year chart, we're in the bullish movement and it's still strong. So in my opinion, for the short term, relatively speaking, maybe the next 2 trading days, give or take, we might head back to the moving averages for the most part, right? So let me go back to the 3 month chart so that way it's easier to see. We might dip down, maybe not even to the moving averages, but somewhere in the zone of 39,700 points, give or take, potentially, maybe, yeah, 39,700, 800 points, or to the moving average, which is about 39,400, well, basically 39,500 points by the time we get to it. And then go back up and break the upward trend resistance level, which is pretty interesting. If that does happen, that will be pretty significant because basically the markets will just continue to go up. And I believe for the Dow Jones, that creates all-time highs. Yeah, so we pretty much had the all-time highs as well for the Dow Jones because we haven't had it for quite some time in a way because the S&P and Nasdaq were creating all-time highs, but then for the Dow Jones, we were stuck in this zone right about here for the whole time. It's probably easier to see right about here. So while the S&P and Nasdaq were creating all-time highs, we're pretty much like bouncing off the support level and consolidating for the most part. So pretty interesting stuff. So there's that. Now for the S&P 500, so I'm going to look at SPY, which is an ETF for the S&P 500, basically same thing. We did create all-time high today, but then dipped down. Like I stated, I wish I was paying attention today fully, because I would have probably shorted one of them for sure. But either way, we went to the previous all-time high during the pre-markets, if you were looking at that, and past the all-time high previously. So all-time high previously was about $562 and some change. And then during the pre-market of that same day, which was pretty much yesterday, it was $563.52, give or take some change here and there. And today we hit that range, $563 and some change. So hit the all-time high, came down. And the question is, what's going to happen? Now, I'm going to go through the MACD lines for this one as well, because the narratives are a little bit different this time between the S&P and Nasdaq, which is kind of strange. Usually they're almost in sync, but it's not too far off. It's not too far off from the Dow Jones either, in a way. So if you look at the 1 month for the MACD line, like I stated, it is in the bearish movement, but by the time we get to Monday's trading day, it could be arching up potentially. Mind you, by the way, we closed at basically $556, but it's $559.99. And then the 3 month chart, it's just crossed over to the bearish movement, so indicating downside. So this 1 month chart in terms of MACD line could be a fake and still continue to the downside. Just to show you example, basically MACD lines, even though they're about to arch up, they could still go down. So you can see that right here back in, for example, June of 2024. So recently, past few trading weeks. And then what I was going to say though is right about here is a 6 month, I believe, is a 6 month, yeah, 6 month, and it's crossing over to a bearish movement. So we have the 3 month and the 6 month crossing over to a bearish movement. So potentially going down, right? Just like we saw in the Dow Jones. So the downside, but then for the S&P, actually S&P is closer to the Dow Jones versus the Nasdaq, because the Nasdaq is not showing a strong upside after the drop, and I'm going to show that soon. But for the S&P 500, it's showing in the 1 year chart, the MACD line, it got basically, in a way, if you really think about it, reignited. So it went from dark green, light green to dark green. So potentially more upside could be coming. And by the way, one thing to note is in terms of mega cap stocks, so for example, Tesla is a mega cap stock. We have earnings coming up in the next 2 weeks, I believe, for Tesla. And Tesla currently stands at, let me see, what's the market cap? The market cap for Tesla is about almost $800 billion, right? So if earnings is pretty good, I think it should be decent, but we'll see. But if that moves up to significantly to upside with what is stated in terms of forecasts and all stuff and how the conference call goes for the company, the stock could just rally like we saw pretty much for the past week. I think it just constantly jumped. So for example, from June 12th, it went from $169 to a high of like 270 almost. So yeah, not too far, not too much. And we're right now in July 12th. So a full month, it went pretty significantly high, right? So there's that. So we could see some crazy movements, and that will carry the market. And maybe that's why potentially the Dow Jones upward trend resistance line since 2021 will break through completely. But we'll see. So yeah, so for the S&P showing upside, short-term downside, just like the Dow Jones, but then further out in terms of long-term upside. So for the short-term, maybe the next 2 trading days, it will be basically to downside potentially. Mind you, these MACD lines don't hold true 100%. They could be altered, not necessarily altered, but the market could be moved by mega cap stocks, right? So if Nvidia starts like jumping 10% randomly on a day, and then the MACD lines were previously pointing to the downside, they could be reversed completely because the mega cap stock carries the market, so on and so forth. And then usually if one stock goes up, the rest of them tend to go up as well a little bit. So the movement of the market could be changed, right? But yeah, so in terms of short term, so in terms of support levels, I already covered them for the Dow Jones. So for the, I'll just jump back to Dow Jones at the end just in case if I didn't cover it. But for the S&P, in terms of support level, we could rely on the moving average a little bit at $558 and some change. And then the next price point that could pretty much hold us, we could consolidate between this price point, 557 and 555 and some change, which essentially could happen actually, to be honest, because you could see a little bit of consolidation resistance right about here, 557 and some change, and consolidation support right about here, which is about 555 and some change. But then also the moving averages will hold us, which is about 556 and some change. So this zone for sure, in my opinion, will hold us for the time being for maybe one trading day. The second trading day will have to be assessed later on. Now I do post these videos daily, so I'll assess it after that, like after the fact. But I think this will pretty much hold us. I don't expect any much crazy dips after that. If we do, you could probably expect 554 and some change, because this pretty much consolidated plus a drop right there, so 554 and some change. And if you think it's going to go crazy to this moving average, you're looking at 550 and some change, which coincides with this resistance level, and then there was a little bit of a support dip right there. You could see that notch right there a little bit. I'll show it closer zoom. So notch dip right there, and that is around roughly about the 550 and some change. So coincides with the moving average as well. Now to the upside, basically we have to tackle the all-time highs, but before we get to the all-time highs, it's about $561 and some change, and then the 563 and some change. There's that. Now let me just double check the Dow Jones just in case if I didn't cover the levels. Yeah, okay, so I think all I covered was the support levels. In terms of resistance levels to the upside, basically we have to break this price point, which is probably going to be quite difficult. I think that's the reason why I didn't cover it fully, is right now we're at 40,000 points basically clean almost, and the upward trend resistance level right now, depending on when we hit it, right, the longer we take, the higher the high will be, and it's about 40,288 points, give or take. Mind you, my lines are not perfect, so you could pretty much look at it as getting close to 40,300 points for the most part. There's that. Now for Nasdaq, I'm going to be looking at the ETF QQQ, which is the ETF for Nasdaq, and then it's basically similar, just different ratios. That's all it is, and it's almost paints the same picture, but it doesn't show a strong strong conviction to the upside, basically, kind of thing. So 1 month chart, MAC line, just like the S&P 500, is in the bearish movement, kind of looking like it could arch up to the upside. 3 month chart, downside, but kind of looks like it could be arching to the upsides again. So it's in the bullish movement, and then technically crossover to the downside technically, but it is arching where it could still continue to the upside. So Nasdaq, because it's a tech sector stock, could be a little different than the rest of them. And then for the 6 month, it is in the bearish movement still, but it could be arching up to the bullish movement. So I guess maybe a little bit different narrative completely than Nasdaq, and different narrative than S&P and Dow Jones. But in the bearish movement, potentially maybe a small drop early part of the first trading day as opposed to 2 trading days potentially, and then just go up to the upside. And maybe that's anticipation of Tesla maybe going up still, or Nvidia going up, both of them completely, but we'll see. And then the 1 year chart, so this is where it's a little bit different. So if you remember, the S&P and the Dow Jones were showing more of an upside for the 1 year. For the 1 year for the Nasdaq, it's showing downside coming up. So maybe for the short term, if in my opinion, what I would like read it as is potentially a small dip, but then more of a bounce to the upside quicker than the S&P and Dow Jones, and then maybe try to approach the all-time highs again, and then dip down somehow. But I don't know how the Nasdaq will dip down without dropping, bringing the S&P with it, because the tech sectors, the big heavy hitters, are what's going to bring it down. Or maybe somehow they go up still, but yet the Nasdaq comes down. I just don't see it that way personally, but this MACD lines doesn't make sense too much in my opinion. So there's that. But either way, if we were to dip down first, right now we're at $494 and some change, and to dip down, basically we would pretty much be hitting this zone right about here, which I'll just show a quick rough line support kind of thing. So you can see support, 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 and a breakthrough right there, and that's roughly about $490 and some change. So I could see us dip down to that price point, right? And if we come back up, we're going to probably be meeting resistance, give or take, about the 495 anyway, and some change, because we saw it acting as support and a little bit of resistance right about here. So resistance, support, support, and then consolidation. So 494 and some change, 495 on the low end, 495 and some change. We could meet resistance at the 492 on the coming up anyway. So if we hit the 490, we're going to see resistance at the 492 anyway, like we saw right about here, consolidation, resistance, and resistance right about here, but then ultimately get to 495. And then the next level would be at the 496 and some change, which hits the moving average as well. So the 496 is right about here. You can see like the resistance consolidation a little bit right about here, and then collides with the moving average. So 496 and some change. And then the next level is about the 497 some change, which is crossing over here and here, with a little bit of the moving average in here. This support line is not really perfect, but you can see resistance, and the moving average crossover. And then the next level is about 499 and some change, which is basically 500. Will we go higher soon? I don't know, debatable. Actually, you know what? It could, because if Tesla rips anyway, we're at 494 and some change. It's 500 is really close. So then basically you're testing at that point this whole consolidation phase right about here, which is about $503 and some change, and then meeting up the pre-market all-time high of 505 and some change, which is pretty interesting for sure. I could see this happening in a way, but it would have to be somehow. Tesla and Nvidia have to go up at the same time, or at least Tesla on its own, and then Nvidia going up a few points up, like 2 percentage points or something like that. But it depends. Again, it'll be pretty much dictated by the whole entire market. If we get a crazy drop, by the way, I don't think I covered it, is we could hit this moving average 498 and some change, and then get to this zone right about here, which was resistance. I think there was like some little bit bump support right there, resistance, and then I think there was a small bumper support as well, but then you can see resistance right there too as well, and that's roughly about 486 and some change. Will we see that? We could see that still. That's only an $8 drop, so that is possible for sure. But that's basically it for today's video. Thanks again for watching. I do appreciate it, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Again, I do post these daily, so if you want to subscribe, be notified when I do upload them. Greatly appreciate it. Thanks again for the support, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care. Peace.